Hey everybody out there on YouTube land, this is Rick Carter from Wrecktitution Media, and yeah, it's been a while since I've done a video. Practically, I've just been kind of debating whether or not I even want to continue because of just, the fact that the more people that hear what I have to say or whatnot, the greater threat I have of having this platform just being removed by YouTube because they're total full of shit now, going after anybody who has an opinion anywhere right of Mao Zedong. And people can't really debate that because it's happened with Laura Southern getting kicked out of Patreon. It's happened with many different alternative media. Even We Are Change, who Luke Radowski, I mean, the guy is completely anti-statist. He's been critical of many of Trump's policies. He doesn't believe that there is any option in the U.S. because of the two-party duopoly that they have there, and I completely understand where he's coming from. And he's been completely demonetized. He's had many of his videos banned. He's had same thing with Press for Truth. Yeah. Anyways, and that's a Canadian independent researcher who practically doesn't believe in any real party in Canada. He's, I guess you can call him an anarchist. But the thing is, he doesn't really have much of a choice here in Canada, because no matter what party you choose, it's all one part or another of a globalist reach to put everyone under their control, whether through its carbon taxation, whether it's through privatization, and like these trans-Pacific partnership trade deals that, I mean, even though Harper put his foot down a couple times, like I said before in other videos, on the dairy side of things, like I understand some good protectionism there in that whole debacle, but I mean, really didn't stop anything when it came to the discussions on what the TPP was going to do. In fact, I actually give Trump his credit for stopping the TPP in the U.S. and getting himself out of these climate deals, because it's a total waste of money and it's a total scam, and it really does little to offset or change anything. And it's practically just a tax on people and set up of a world government where we have to follow rules that are made up by internationally unelected bankers who don't give a rat's ass about the people in different countries that are all about the elitist pyramid structure of control and segregation. That's what it comes down to. And when you look at just one of the many different tools they use, the media, for example, has lost all objectivity. They've came out many different times saying we need to kill Trump, but apparently these people don't get kicked off of Facebook or Twitter or YouTube because it's trendy to hate Trump, and God forbid that we hurt anybody's social justice warrior agenda there, or call them out for their fucking communist agendas, like Antifa, for example. And that's what pisses me off the most, is that they're saying, oh, Trump's a racist. And now, as soon as I've seen on CNN, I've seen on MSNBC, on many different types of mainstream media, even here CBC, how they're saying, oh, Trump didn't decry the Charleston event with a white nationalist and the neo-Nazis fast enough. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? He did it many different times. And that's just another tactic of the mainstream media, of doing that whole, oh, you have to disavow this person. Oh, David Duke voted for you. Do you disavow? Do you disavow? How about Hillary Clinton disavow Robert Byrd, her fucking KKK Grandmaster mentor? Huh? No, they won't do that. They don't give a shit about that, and that's the truth. And how about the mainstream media decry, McCain for going over and meeting with a Svoboda party in Ukraine, who are known neo-Nazi supporters and are practically with this army that they've had that goes back to they've killed over 40,000 Poles back to World War II, and they have these vigils in the street for dead Nazi soldiers, and giving them their praise and admiration. And in I think Ukraine, they have the Joseph Goebbels Political Research Center that was established after the overthrow of Ukraine. But apparently, the people, Russia, took over the Crimea, even though Russia and Crimea has had a history together ever since, for hundreds of years now. It's not even, it's such a spin that the media puts on there. And, Obama could do no wrong when he was in power, even though he, illegally, caused the downfall of entire North Africa by taking out Libya. Libya had one of the highest living standards when Gaddafi was he wasn't the perfect leader by any means. He was completely batshit crazy with his little umbrella saying death to America. And I've said many times, But the fact was that he actually was putting a lot of money into programs and was actually thinking of making a gold-backed dinar. And, the central banks couldn't have this, and so they used it as the humanitarian excuse, but they actually funded al-Qaeda groups under Hillary Clinton's, and they have WikiLeaks talking about how she's been funding them. And you know what, the WikiLeaks, how about the WikiLeaks where it said that there was over 50 people in the fucking Democrats' pockets, and these were like people like George Stephanopoulos, huge anchors in MSM, NBC, they had it on BuzzFeed, Politico, they had all these people on the freaking payroll that was exposed by WikiLeaks, and they say that, this is all Russian hackers for the last year, right? But they barely touch about the Seth Rich story, where he was, here you go. At first, it was a little kind of questionable as it is, because he was on the IT staff. He did have access to a lot of potentially politically sensitive stuff involved with the DNC, Democratic National Convention, and the Democratic Party with Podesta and stuff. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, when she was head of it, I mean, she had to resign just from the basic scandal that she had before, when the emails showed that she was stealing the nomination from Bernie by making his, doing everything they could to demonize him. They even had people from the Democratic operatives through their little PAC companies dress up as Trump supporters to go out and fight Bernie supporters to make it look bad in the media. And it's just total bullshit. It's all exposed by WikiLeaks. Nobody seems to care. The media never freaking went to anybody else. If it was Trump that tried to do this shit, he wouldn't have made it, because the media would have grilled him so bad about this. And it just goes to show you just the blatant mind control of the mainstream media by not focusing on the fact that Hillary Clinton had many different scandals and that she was not an honest and trustworthy person, as much as the media, she has all this experience. Yeah, being a criminal. Make sure you're freaking putting a master criminal in office. I mean, look what she did to the Haitian people through the Clinton Foundation. She's ripped off billions of, even the New York Times had to question whether or not she, they tried to half-ass it as much as they could for damage control, but she barely put any of money into what she got into the actual, the Haitian relief from what they were supposed to. And they're still getting money for it, because the last disaster, their connection to Laura Silsby, who was caught trafficking 30 some odd different kids, without the right papers. It was all really sketchy, the stuff that the Clintons are involved in. And the fact that Seth Rich was murdered, and then they found some of the evidence and that could have been possibly on his laptop, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been trying to get it back for a while because it could possibly contain some stuff on there, and apparently the FBI managed to get as much stuff that was off on there, and there's this whole suit that's going down now with the Allman brothers. And what I think is crazy is that we hear all this Russian bullshit, Russian this, Russia that, but the media isn't reporting on the fact that there's this huge Debbie Wasserman Schultz scandal, where there's Fox kind of is a couple times I've noticed, but they're still a controlled media. They've always been known to be catering towards Republicans, even though they've kind of gone a little shift towards the center. I think just because of the establishment's hatred and just bewilderment the Trump administration. And you know what? Trump's doing the best he can, but he's gone on there with this thinking that he could actually negotiate with people who are in the deep state. The deep state, they've had power for generations. They've had power ever since the banking elite started funding the political candidates of, even the 1913s with Woodrow Wilson. If you look into just the whole story of the Federal Reserve and how it was completely thrown at around when everybody, all the people's members of Congress were at home with their families around New Year's. completely snuck in as legislation, and then they had the power to print the money supply, and they had complete power over the money supply. And any government that gives the power of their printing supply over to a private entity is a fucking retard. It's a system that, as much as they say central banking is good, because we can all tell who, in case somebody gets their credit downgraded or doesn't pay or blah 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 blah, but I mean, like, Iceland has managed to pay off their debt, and even though right now they're kind of controlled by a really kind of crazy government that has like anarchists and like socialists and capitalists, and it's like kind of a weird mixture of stuff. So I mean, but all the more power to them, because they have at least control over the printing power of their money. And I mean, if you are able to figure out your credit rating easily by how well you can pay back what you've borrowed from yourself. Now, if you're like Zimbabwe or like the Weimar, when it was just practically they're printing out so much money and not actually investing into infrastructure or using their resources as collateral in the markets, then they practically made sure their paper was worthless. But I mean, a country like Canada, for example, can easily break the control of central banking or private banking, for that matter, because central bankers are the ones that control the groups of private banks that are practically in on it. And if you don't ask me, just look at the people in the EU, for example. A lot of these people are Goldman Sachs bankers who were not elected. They're not politicians. They get elected into the EU and their little fucking thing there to pass whatever they want. In fact, towards the whole Brexit thing, EU was making up to 80% of Britain's laws. Like, where's the fairness in that? Where's the representation? Where's the taxation without representation, which was the entire premise of the reason why the American Revolution was fought, so that they could make their own power of printing their own money. And there was many different times in the history of the U.S. presidency, and just the U.S. history of presidents that have fought the creation of a central bank or a private banking entity. Jefferson, Jackson, there's a few other more. There's many different. Even Canada has our heroes, like Mackenzie King spoke out about the evils of central banking, and they put him on the $5 bill, which is funny. It's like they take all the people that were against the bank and creating a private entity that makes the nation's money, and they put the people who were against it on the face of their money, which is just ridiculous. I mean, I guess it's kind of a final jab at them from the elites. But it's really crazy when you look into just the fact that it's the same people that are controlling the groups. Like, when you look at just like Chase Manhattan, for example. I mean, just like the many different generations that they have in the U.S. And that's what I love about the U.S., because it is a completely corporate system, but it does have some free market, inclinations towards it. But I mean, there's still mass inequality. There's still socialism that goes on in that country, in the way where they're bailing out the banks, which is a total socialist model, and also the same thing with the central bank, with the Federal Reserve. A communist tenet is a central bank, because they make sure that they can practically manipulate the currencies or monopolies in whatever way they kind of want. That's the whole idea of state control, and having a corporate enterprise mixed in with state enterprise. So yeah, it's been crazy just to see how there really hasn't been an equal amount of debate for news sources anymore. And that's why InfoWars, that's why We Are Changed, that's why Press for Truth, that's why Corbett Report, that's why even RT do a lot of sense, except for stuff when it comes to Russia. I kind of take that with a grain of salt, because obviously a Kremlin funded, even they do so a little bit of, they do like the 3-hour questions and answers with Putin's and stuff like that, to kind of like show that they're actually, but I mean, I wouldn't want to live in Russia, let's just say that. I mean, they do have a lot of oligarchs there that kind of run things and stuff. And I mean, Canada is becoming kind of going towards a socialist kind of, multiculturalist. You can't say anything bad about, religious ideas that aren't compatible with Western values. But, as soon as you try to point that out, I mean, I can't understand how, I'm noticing it's not just the states Democrats that are embracing Islam. Like, you have like Newsweek that's saying, "Oh, here's the face of feminism," and it has like a woman in a fucking like hijab or burqa or whatnot. But I mean, you're talking about a religious ideology that subjugates women for not having a male escort, or doesn't consider men and women on an equal level to begin with, and they're being completely adopted as the feminist ideology for the left. And I noticed that's happening here in Canada. They're doing it here with with the Liberal Party. Just how they've like you had Trudeau saying how he's a feminist, a male feminist, and then he goes to a hobbyist mosque and he's like talking about how it's just a wonderful thing that all the women are sitting up at the top and all the religious men are down here, like having their little religious thing, like totally fine with segregation if it's a religious thing. So it's a really dangerous kind of road, because anybody who kind of like says something like, well, here's the the irony of you saying you're a male feminist yet supporting Sharia law. When you point that out, all of a sudden you become the bad guy. You become the neo-Nazi, which is total bullshit. And it's the people that are noticing these different these fallacies that are the ones that are getting their channel shut down, that are being silenced. And that's what I think is funny, because as much as they try to like label anybody alt-right for that matter, or having conservative or some Republican values, like for me, I consider myself more like classical liberal, because I don't care what people do in their bedroom and shit like that. Like I don't care about the whole like as long as it's adults and they're consenting, whatever happens behind closed doors, I don't really care. It has I don't believe government should have a say in what goes on in the bedroom and stuff like that. Some people who are like more classical, who believe more in like the Republican traditions of like male and female marriage and stuff like that. I can see where they're coming from, but it's just not my thing. And I'm not going to be the kind of person that's going to be like, oh, well, they're wrong because of that, and I'm the righteous one, or just, I just have my own opinion on things, and I'm totally fine to debate that with other people, and I see, where they're coming from, no matter what their side is. I have no problem debating somebody who's from Antifa, but the thing is, a lot of these leftists do not want to debate. They're paid actors in a lot of these cases, especially what's going on when you're seeing, I've been watching many different footages from Berkeley, from stuff like that. The ones that are really violent are there. They come to a protest. If you come to a protest and you're willing to cover your face, there's something going on. Hey, if it's a kind of a protest where, you don't want to be, you don't want to be found for, possibly having to be put on some sort of registry. I went to Toronto, and they had like the back years ago when they had the Million Mask March, when they had so I brought my anonymous mask and just kind of kept it on my face, kind of thing, and didn't take it off there because I saw that the police were like trying to, but that was more of a non-violent getting together of people for just a non-violent protest. But what we're seeing is a lot of people that are dressing up in black Antifa, black bloc style kind of stuff, and are going to town, are causing shit, are coming with like shit-filled and piss-filled fucking water balloons and stuff like that. The right's not doing that shit. They may bring a tiki torch and, but they're more in like the weird kind of like brown shirt looking kind of like setup, where where they're trying to make like Abercrombie and Fitch and Doc Martens and stuff like that look good. I don't know, but they're just or whatever types of stuff that's affiliated to their Hugo Boss belts, I guess. I don't know. They're all ridiculous in my books, but there's definitely a very kind of communist left that's pushing towards this whole thing with and when you look into it, a lot of it's George Soros funding, and it's not just George Soros, there's other groups out there too, but George Soros has been tied with a lot of the Move On groups, and the women's groups and the Islamic groups with CARE. They're all pushing this cultural warfare. They want this Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter was originally perpetrated. Let's understand this. What made Black Lives Matter was CNN, when they had their correspondents on saying pushing the whole hands up, don't shoot bullshit narrative, and that was totally false, because the person who originally said that in court, when it was actually with other different witnesses, when they had to testify, they say no, Michael Brown was actually going towards the police officer, and the police officer had to do what he had to do, kind of thing. But CNN pushed the wrong narrative, and CNN is fine when a riot gets out of control and it's like Black Lives Matter and they burn down their entire fucking neighborhood, which is mostly minority-owned businesses. They're totally fine with that. But, God forbid you say something bad about political Islam, or you say something bad about, the fact that the left has been pushing a lot of these, like there's Marxist and communist teachers and this is like a thing that's been found in a lot of different universities and colleges all over the world. It's not just, it's a push to go after more conservatives, but yet, God forbid, you say something against communism, or you say something bad about the People's Uprising and the Workers' Revolution and all that bullshit, because apparently the West is just such a bad and evil entity, and, they have all these revisionists that are talking about just how horrible we are when, we allow a lot of really great living. Like, if you want to go and buy property somewhere in Canada or the States, and you have like money or whatnot, you can go live on that property and not, like, there's places where you can go and you could just do whatever the hell you want and never get bothered. It's not like China, where they are making sure that everything you do is monitored electronically, because they have this thing where if you even talk about Tiananmen Square, or if you talk about the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, they will give you a low score. They'll give you a bunch of reprimands. They'll make it so that your living life there is hell, practically. And things have gotten better living wise. Like, they're able to have cell phones, and they're allowed to have 2 children instead of just 1 children now. But they still have mobile abortion bans. They still have mobile execution bans. They still harvest the organs of Falun Gong practitioners because they live a very healthy lifestyle, but because they're prisoners under the Chinese law. They're totally fine with the fact that they're making more and more coal plants without any coal scrubbers whatsoever. So they try to make themselves seem like the best place. Come to China. And, you look at the commercials and the air's all clean, and I'm like, no, that's not real. So, because when you actually look at it, it's a fucking smog fucking infested hellhole, where people are walking around with fucking masks and shit, respirators, just to be able to fucking breathe. I mean, they have the the fiber, I'm trying to think, the plastics that they have there for I'm trying to think, there for also textiles too. They have all these people that are working in industries where they have no environmental, they don't have respirating things, so they get fucking sand and glass in their lungs and shit like that, and fucking have horrible fucking lifespans, and just don't live that long. There's a lot of crazy shit that's happening, and I mean, some places you can go where there's businesses where they have big blocks where they can where their rent's subsidized, where they work, they live, they do all this stuff in one kind of area thing. And then some of those companies actually do treat them in a good way, but I mean, you're still living your whole life in one tiny little area to be the production costs of the great Chinese empire. So, but I wouldn't want to live there, and they don't take kindly to people who go and have a dissenting opinion on things. And I think that everybody should have an opinion to say whatever the hell they want and be able to back it up with whatever sources, whatever facts are out there to support their beliefs. And it's the marketplace of ideas. Everybody can go and see what they're representing, and if they don't like what they're representing, or they think that they're representing is hateful, then they just don't follow that person or go and do something else. It's really not that hard of logic to comprehend. And it's only when you let somebody's opinions, when you're constantly watching them and you're constantly looking for something to attack them on, kind of thing like that it's really you that's becoming the audience. It's you that's giving that person power. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize that these racist statues that they're taking down all across the U.S. are a good majority Democratic leaders of the past. I mean, you try to tell a Black Lives Matter supporter, all these people that are all about taking down racist statues, that the Republicans were actually the party that was against slavery historically a lot, in the 60s and also during the Emancipation, even though, a lot of people, give Lincoln praise. He's been quoted to say, if I could have freed united the country and never freed a slave, I would have done it. But he did it purely as a militaristic kind of tactic, knowing that the South's economy relied heavily on slave labor. I mean, once they got rid of the whole slavery thing, they ended up bringing in a bunch of cheap Irish and Scottish and like Ukrainians and like people from different parts of Europe that were willing to work their ass off. So I mean, it just replaced slavery of one type with another, even though they paid them very little. It was just, it really comes down to just the fact that through a historical context, you can look at anything with a kind of a rose lens of the modern outlook on things today and just be like, no, that's just horrible. I can't believe these people were treated so badly or whatnot. But back in those days, those people were just trying to make a living. That was the normal of the day for a lot of things. I mean, like, you can go back to the 1600s and not being able to understand what people are fucking talking about in English. It's when you look at things on a long enough scale, you can see how things change. I mean, we have, in a lot of ways, it's kind of good that we have all this technology to get connected, to have all these access to resources and stuff. But a lot of people don't take advantage of that. They just get lazy and follow off what they see from like the first 3 sentences of what they read on a Facebook post or something like that. When a lot of this time it is fake news, it is misinformation. You have to spend a lot of time. I mean, I spend about anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours a day. That's because my back's all screwed up and stuff, and even sitting like this and talking for this long it's been really kind of a pain in the butt. But I mean, I make sure that I'm like looking at different news sources from a lot of different places and from different political leanings. I just happen to agree more recently I have to say, with a lot of the more right-leaning media outlets out there, because they're the ones that are getting censored. They're the ones that are getting attacked when it's, but God forbid, one tiny fringe element, extreme element from, I mean, you have extreme elements in any kind of religion or any kind of different group or whatnot. But it's the amount of attacks, it's the amount of how much it affects our society as a whole that really needs to be addressed, that needs to be reported on, It's funny how there's been plenty of people who've been beaten up for wearing Trump stuff, who have been fucking stabbed, who have almost fucking been killed. And there's police who have been killed by Black Lives Matter's supporters who have gone completely batshit crazy and started going on fucking shooting sprees and shit like that. But the media doesn't fucking talk about that. Media doesn't talk about the fact that last weekend 9 people were killed in the city of Chicago by gang violence, by black on black shooting, But, we don't talk about that in the media because it's total fucking bullshit. It's all meant to make you think that, oh, there's this epidemic of police shooting black people when they're more likely to shoot a white person, and the fact that, let's not criticize the entire prison system that we have, the largest prison system in the world, with the most amount of people incarcerated. Let's not look at ways to fix that. Let's not criticize the Clintons for putting in the 3-strike rule originally during the 90s, which has like destroyed black families that have, for people who have just were selling like small time, like non-violent crimes, like selling drugs and stuff like that, without any kind of physical violence involved in there whatsoever. But because they got busted 3 times trying to feed their family, they're in jail now for the rest of their fucking lives. And you don't see the media report on that. That's what pisses me off. And the fact that there's just so much bullshit, and what doesn't get reported on is just as important. What does get reported on in a lot of these cases, and I've seen it with CBC, I've seen it with CTV here in Canada, where it's this huge push to criticize anyone. In fact, as much as the Rebel has had some like internal things going on here in Canada, the fact that they've been really the main ones, the first ones that started reporting on the fact that we were getting flooded from the States, from all these people that were like, oh no, Trump's in power, so now we have to go to Canada because, they're not going to have, Justin Trudeau, our fucking Prime Minister Pink Socks, practically said, diversity is our strength. Come, illegals, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure that we, give you all the money in the place where you can stay for free for a year, even though there are people that are fucking complaining about it that came, that are saying they're not getting enough free shit. And there's Canadians that are fucking homeless. There's, veterans and single moms that are having a hell of a time just paying fucking rent right now for the hydro. Here in Ontario, we've been overcharged over, 13 billion and freaking overall on our freaking hydro costs, which is total bullshit, and it's just goes to show you how the Liberals have fucked us over here. So it's you really don't have an opportunity to defend yourself politically here in Canada. I mean, I did some work for the NDP because I looked at their platform and I figured, they're the better of the 3 choices, but I mean, even though we have the Green Party, but they're all about population control, making like a fucking tax on everything that like just stupid shit. It really is population control. But the NDP, I mean, at least with their platform, some of the stuff that they had there actually looked like they were going to do some stuff and that they would actually like kind of have it budget. But I mean, you never really know with the NDP. If they got in there, they could have done the same thing. And when it came down to Mulcair, when he started criticizing Trump, when I noticed that Peggy Nash and Paul DeWar were like big supporters of the new Kiev regime, which is run by fucking neo-Nazis. It kind of really pissed me off, and I didn't want anything more to do with that. I understand that there's like about a 2 million Ukrainian population that originally came here from Soviet Russia, and I understand that, and I respect that, but they have to understand that, they are not Russia is not a communist nation anymore. Like, it didn't work. They're doing more capitalism and stuff now. They're actually trying to promote free enterprise, organic farms without GMOs and stuff like that. They're banning GMOs. Like what? That's a badass thing to do. I mean, even though they're a country that if you're gay, you're probably you have to really watch and all that stuff. They're not really friendly to LGBT or like other groups and stuff like that. I mean, like I wouldn't want to live in Russia for those people or anything like that, but. I mean, they are showing the fact that they aren't as strictly communist as what they used to be before. But I mean, it really is crazy to see just how Ukraine has turned completely right wing. And it's run by people who denounce the organized Jewry and just all this like ridiculous stuff. And so they're going after Trump for neo-Nazism when Obama and Soros and Victoria Nuland and their whole foreign policy was based on getting a neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine to fight the Russians. I mean, when you look at the Odessa massacre, it wasn't a bunch of Russians that killed themselves, which is what the narrative was. It was a bunch of neo-Nazis that went into the building and fucking murdered people who were part of the political version of the people that wanted to be more pro-Russia in their talks between if they were going to go for the pro-EU or pro-Russia. And when you see the fact that the day after they finally massacred the biggest political opposition towards going to the EU and for playing into the Victoria Nuland, the U.S. Corporate globalist agenda, then then they got wired about $3 billion. It was $3 million from a George Soros affiliated group. So it just goes to show you how much just that stuff was bullshit. And they even have it wasn't a popular uprising. They went to the Maidan Square, and there's reports that George Soros used right sector troops to shoot on both sides, both protesters and police, to turn it into a violent revolution. And why that's of historical note is, hey, what happened if we were going to see something like that in the U.S.? If there's a free speech rally, for example, or whatnot, or a protest where they start using it as where either left or the right, I mean, it could be anyone, or even a government agent could cause the possibility of a civil war to break. I mean, there's just so much division that's in the States right now, but for me, it's like, from what I've noticed, it's not Trump that's causing it. It's the fucking media. It's the media making him out to be this neo-Nazi, saying that he didn't disavow the right as much as he should have, when he disavowed it many different times. He disavowed it like 3 times just in the first day, for example, within couples of hours after the event. And yet the media's like, he didn't disavow. Oh my God, he's a right-wing Nazi supporting lover. Oh no, now everyone on the alternative right is a neo-Nazi. It's just total fucking bullshit. Just total psyop, really. And for people that believe it, I'm sorry, dude, but you really gotta look into fucking what's going on with alternative viewpoints here. Like, I've seen at least 40 hours of footage from different protests, whether or not it was Berkeley, like all over the place. And one second. And a lot of the times, it's these people that are dressed up in black, Antifa, with their masks covered, going around causing shit with fucking people who are Trump supporters and stuff. And I mean, the more like neo-Nazis, the alt-right, like the really kind of like crazy ones who are Nazi sympathizers, Like, fuck them, for example. I don't agree with anything they say. Oh, damn, sorry. But, you know, they're also, like, they're the ones probably more on the right that are willing to, like, you know, get into a violent kind of thing. But a lot of the alternative right that was more of the Kekistan, kind of like Pepe the Frog, like trolling social justice warriors and just kind of debunking the whole bullshit cultural Marxism of feminism, which kind of goes a little bit into the political kind of ideology of kind of staying in that kind of level, because I think a lot of people in like kind of main culture realizes that third wave feminism in its extreme version is a total piece of shit. It's cultural Marxism. It's victimhood ideology, which just doesn't help anything whatsoever. It doesn't bring people together. It doesn't solve any issues. It's just, it makes people, you know, stab each other in the back because they're not being, you know, liberal enough, or you know, they're not giving into an ideology enough. And it just really kind of goes into a void of virtue signaling. And those people, usually at the rallies, who are just doing the free speech thing, are just there to troll the social justice warriors, or there because they believe in free speech, or they believe in supporting Donald Trump. And that's a good majority of the population. It's the very small fringe people that, you know, but I can't say that every single person that was at this event was Antifa, but there was a lot of Antifa. That there are people who were getting paid to go there for $25 a day or an hour and get paid to hold signs. I mean, you could really tell because there's a lot of independent reporters on the left, on the right, and for people who are anarchist or libertarian or agorists who don't even, like, just believes in more of a public space for everything, and kind of like believes in a more open market where everyone has value and doesn't get screwed over as much, you know. I mean, it's all these different ideologies that were there to cover the left, and they just have no, like, when they go up to people, like even a leftist, like, was it, I think, I'm trying to, Tim something, I can't remember his name, was going over and trying to talk to these people, and they just said, oh, you're an alt-right or neo-Nazi, you know. It's just all fascist, sexist, homophobe. It's just all these stupid shit that they keep screaming, but they don't have any argument whatsoever. They can't back it up with why they believe, or they'll say something that was either a media talking point that is completely untrue. You know, it's like when people, when I've talked to many different people, when, you know, I mentioned something about Alex Jones, and they're like, oh, what, the gay frogs, or the stuff, the government putting chemicals in the water to make the frogs turn gay. And that is like the same talking point that I hear people, like, you know, come back to me with when I'm like trying to talk about like other different alternative media sources or stuff like that. And, you know, to a certain extent, they're not even the best ones out there, but they, I do believe, honestly, that Alex Jones does believe what he says he does, because there's a lot of people out there in alternative media, and even people that haven't seen eye to eye with him, like Joe Rogan and stuff like that, that will say that he's a legitimate guy or whatnot, you know, I mean, and he legitimately believes what he, you know, but I've looked into, like, people's arguments, and I've just seen so many different people out there that are trying to, like, put this whole bullshit thing with Stratfor before or whatnot, which, you know, okay, like, may have been a thing way back in the day or whatnot, but, you know, somebody works at something beforehand and then gets hired. I mean, I can understand where there's some criticism. That was really the only thing I could hear of, was just, because he had one lady working at from Stratfor, that had it on a resume or whatnot, was like a U.S. Israel kind of Jewish operations kind of thing, Zionist or whatnot. And yeah, I understand, like, the criticisms of people who are more like neo-Nazi that are trying to, you know, call him out for not calling out more of the Rothschild and, like, you know, kind of like Zionist agenda and stuff like that. But let's be honest, I mean, Obama really kind of diminished Israel's effect on, I mean, yeah, they were still giving him, you know, tons of money to oppress, you know, to the Palestinians with. And like I said, I believe in a two-state solution. I believe both sides really need to kind of, like, fucking work that shit out, you know. But obviously that's a religious debate, that's like a fight that's been going on for countless generations and will continue probably, just because of, you know, hate spawns hate, sort, you know, which is kind of a sad thing. But anyways, what I'm saying is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, like, with the whole thing of seeing Trump kind of treating his administration, and I'm starting to get a little bit critical now of what he's doing. Within the stuff that he did within the first 60, 70 days, I had a lot of respect for, making sure that, like, now the illegal immigration that's coming across the border has gone down, even though they haven't really started building a wall. It's just the anticipation. A lot of people know that, and they're picking up the illegals that they are picking up and deporting are the ones that are causing crimes. The ones, you're not supposed to be here. You're gone. It's the criminals they're going after, and they're not going after just regular people who are trying to, make it, who are here illegally. They're going after the criminals first. They're the ones that are causing the most damage, and so by all means, I mean, that's the reason why you're supposed to have an immigration system in the first place. And it should never be a left-right system. It's historical context. I mean, like, when you ever look at like the British Union in like the 50s and 60s, when they started bringing in a bunch of Indians from the whole thing that was going on. I think there was like a cultural thing in India between the Muslims there that they had with Pakistan, and there was a lot of Indians that came over in the 50s and 60s. And they kind of let it in because it was, at that time, it was still considered, they were still considered British subjects because of the way the passport laws were. And so a lot of Indians and Pakistanis came to the UK, and with the fact that they brought in all this cheap labor, it really kind of screwed over the steel and the manufacturing. And then you also have the fact that Thatcher came in during the 80s and kind of screwed things up there too. I mean, she put in a lot of like regulations in there too. Well, actually deregulations, but made sure that she was kind of like taking out certain aspects of the metallurgies and like manufacturing capabilities and kind of putting it more of it overseas, kind of moving towards more shale gas and what she saw as like a nuclear power kind of option, which is really where the green movement originally started to come, because she knew that if she can get more people to produce, to promote nuclear power, then she could use different funding and different grants through scientific institutions to go after the whole carbon dioxide problem. And like I said, I've explained that before in many different videos. One video I've done for sure, but the Societal Manipulation series, I believe, really kind of goes into more detail, so I recommend anybody who's listening to that to go watch that. So anyways, I'm going to stop talking because I'm talking for like ridiculously long times when I do these things. But anyways, thank you very much for listening to me. I just had to talk about the fact that this whole social media censorship is just getting really out of hand. It's completely targeting anybody who criticizes. I mean, they have Lee Dorn. Stephen Crowder brought this to attention. A guy who made a video showing just how like the Japanese, weren't all completely innocent. Like Pearl Harbor, they kind of were a little sneaky there, even though the U.S. knew about the attack about 2 weeks beforehand, and also did a lot to hamper their oil. But I mean, the stuff that they did to to their prisoners of war, and the stuff that they did to the Chinese and stuff like that, were really, really brutal. And for just reporting that in his historical contents, he had the video completely removed because it was offensive, apparently. So it just goes to show you just how this whole thing is just. It really is turning into this leftist censorship when it used to be the right that used to censor things. It used to be like those religious church ladies that would show up to rock concerts and protest Kiss and stuff like that. Those were the ones that were the uncool, crazy censorship ones. But now it's the leftists. It's these people who have no argument, who are usually paid for by these NGOs or multinational groups of people that are trying to push these fucking agendas, that show up to these rallies that are told not to talk to anybody or and not actually have a debate with them or tell them the reason why they're there for the protest. They just show up in numbers and it gets reported on the media as this, oh, look at these people that are all 110% there protesting and they're not getting paid anything for it and they're taking time off their own day. No, these are people, a lot of these at the time, the left are people that are basement dwellers that have nothing better to do and are getting paid for by these George Soros groups and are getting bussed out there. When you see all these different counter protests, these free speech, it's all these like huge private buses, all paid for, and all these like dirty, smelly fucking protesters are coming out there and fucking in droves and going to the protest. They're not It's obvious that they are not just there protesting out of their own free will. I mean, some people are, and some people get into the whole thing, especially after this whole Charleston thing, because they had I guess like a anti-Islamophobia protest in Vancouver, and because, obviously all these, like, social justice warriors that fucking, hear everything, all the bad things about Trump, and, because they're Canadian, and they have, Prime Minister Pink Socks, who's, spent about almost $200 billion so far, and just a little over the year that he's been in power, on bankrupting Canada and spending more money on non-Canadians than actual Canadians. And this is the guy who says that, the problem with the native, communities is that, they don't have proper lake canoe houses and stuff like that, which is total bullshit, because they have areas up north that are under like these like native populations and like these native cities and towns and stuff like that are under boil water advisory, that have like all this like toxic shit in their fucking water and stuff like that. But the Liberals won't go in there and do anything about them. The biggest problem is they don't have a canoe house, a place to put their canoe after they're on the lake, when they're out there ice fishing or hunting or whatnot. So the guy's just totally out of touch with reality, and just, I cannot believe that guy is. I'm just waiting for him to legalize weed, because that's probably the only good thing that you could possibly get out of there, I guess, for Canadians. Everything else, cybersecurity, God forbid you have a different opinion. These M103 motions, it's funny how they came out when they were talking about that, and they had GADSAD, they had Jordan Peterson, they had a really well-renowned defense lawyer going up there and saying, listen, if you put these, like, there's nothing here that says what Islamophobia is. Like, you can, even though it's a motion right now, it can be used under the, if the Human Rights Council decides to go against you or whatnot, and they decide to give you a fine or charge you, if you don't pay it, or if you don't do what they say, then you can get fined. You can get held in with contempt and actually go to jail over, not being politically correct. And that is just fucking crazy. And the fact that all these defenders said, it's just emotion, man, it's not actually gonna, well, they're actually coming out with I guess legislation next year, they're saying, about how they're going to make it harder for, they're going to go after people for hate speech. Hate speech. It's hate speech to say that, the Sharia law fucking executes gays off of fucking buildings and shit like that. But yet the left is completely fucking fine with Sharia law, which is what blows my mind, and just really is kind of made me shift more, kind of center, more maybe a little center right. I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of getting to that point where, I'm kind of just wondering what the hell is wrong with people. I mean, that whole idea of classic liberalism, where you listen to people's ideas or have a debate with them and find, people, realize through their own kind of research or their own value system, what is a better form of idea than another. Then, it's a marketplace of ideas, and it's such a complex concept now to people, when it used to be the biggest thing that we used to say, you have the right to say anything you want over there, I believe, and that was the biggest, that's what World War II and World War I was fought over, and, aside from helping out the British, obviously, but, there was an actual genuine threat, a global threat to taking over, the free way of life, where you can say what you want to say, and, you can, live your life the way you want to live it, kind of thing, for the most part, as long as you don't hurt anyone. But, people take that for granted, and they think that we should live in some sort of communist, socialist utopia. And those people have no idea what reality is about. Because, it's okay to say that, we got to shut these people down, or we got to shut that down, but you have to replace it with something else. And if you can't replace it with a viable economic option, you're going to fuck yourself over. You're going to fuck your country over. Obviously there's a lot of things that need to change. The fact that, fractional reserve banking is a thing. The fact that derivatives are a thing. You have all these things in the stock market that are meant as, like, bets on extracting wealth from the economy. And I don't see why we should have those. I mean, I believe that you should have a supply and demand system based on what it is. Maybe even put some reserve value on something. Have, like, a reserve market for people that are putting stuff in like storage or something like that, because it makes absolutely no sense to me that we have a global economic system that's based on, let's say if you have a really bad drought in an area for 2-3 years, well, there's no more supply of that material, that commerce in that area for that 3 years, and a lot of the times in the market, aside from maybe if you have a little bit of stock, and then it increases the value of the price of what you have left, because there's not that much of it, and the supply goes up and compared to the demand of it. Then obviously you're going to lower the price. But when you don't have when something fails on a long-term basis, we don't have a system that rewards countries for having a backup. It's all everything on that price of what orange juice is or what coffee is for that particular day is based on exactly what is being sold and what the whole thing is at that time, at that fraction moment in time. And depending on anything else, it could go up or down depending on what happens, either through the environment, through political means, through socioeconomic means, you name it, all these different factors. So it really is kind of interesting to see just how we have this kind of monetary system too that is built to put us into a spiraling debt of every dollar that's printed has debt accumulated to it. You'll never pay off that original debt. It's not rocket science. But yet apparently it is to some people. And the compounded interest of the fact that we're paying off maybe 8% of what we originally borrowed, and 4 out of the 12 years 4 out of the 12 months of the year of what you make from your job goes into practically paying taxes, which is just how it is. And it's something that we only borrowed a very small amount of to begin with. But because of the compounding interest, and because the IMF and the World Bank sugar daddies need your money, they need to pay those exorbitant fucking salaries to all their unelected bankers that are in their EU fucking commons. It's ridiculous. And so they're the same people that are promoting, bring in all these economic migrants. Oh yeah, bring in Islam. Don't say anything bad about it. Pay no attention to the Aztec attacks. They have the media now trying to promote what Russia originally. First, Russia was communist Putin puppet, but since they had no evidence of that, now he is the second incarnation of Hitler. It's fucking get your story straight, mainstream media. They're talking about how the alternative media has pushed all these fucking conspiracy theories and stuff like that, when they've only just reported on a lot of different. Hey, you know what? If there's something happens and kind of a circumstantial kind of thing, let's say when you have a coincidence, one or two things happen during some event that's kind of questionable. Well, you can't really go on a lot of that. But when you have an event that happens, let's say 9/11 or the 7/7 bombing, where they have drills going on of the exact same type at the exact same time with a whole bunch of hundreds of other coincidences that normally would not have happened that happened on that day. You have to ask some questions, and these people, these media outlets, get demonized for that, for just asking questions. And the mainstream media, they're the ones that push the conspiracy theory of how the original Gulf War, how Saddam's troops were going into Kuwaiti hospitals and taking the babies out of the incubators and throwing them on the ground and taking the incubators, which was a made-up bullshit story. And George Bush went to war on that premise. They went to war on the premise of the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam, which I think anybody should really look into and look at the history of false flags, or the history of even something that is not questioned whatsoever, is Operation Northwoods, which is an actual plan during the 60s to bring America into war with Cuba, to dress up American soldiers or Cuban nationals or friendlies that they had, and had them go and hijack a U.S. plane and crash it into, they were actually talking about committing terrorism, a false flag operation to get us into a war with Cuba back in the day. And I mean, that would have caused a nuclear war because obviously Cuba and the Soviet Union were big buddies at the time, you know? I mean, it was a good thing that, you know, Kennedy had some sense and said, no, that's a really bad idea. But I mean, George Bush, I think he had a lot. I mean, when you look at what happened after 9/11, okay, 9/11 happens. And the family of all the suspects that you know of, because they had really good ties on bin Laden. They knew where all the family was. In fact, they had a business meeting the day of 9/11, what happened. And like, the day after, they personally, the FBI and the CIA, personally get all the people together who are related to the bin Ladens and flew them out when all the other planes were completely grounded. Like, when you have a murder suspect, do you fly that person out of the country the first moment you get after a murder happens and they're the prime suspect? No. You ask them questions. You keep them around. You find out where they were, what their stories were, whether or not their stories checked out. But none of that stuff happened. And, you know, the 28 pages that got released showed that Bush knew that it was Saudi Arabia. There was a Saudi Arabia ambassador. They call him Bindar Bush because he was Prince Bindar. He was like I think he was the ambassador for U.S. or the ambassador to Pakistan, I believe, or Saudi Arabia. I can't remember, but they had a bunch of connections between the Saudi government and the 9/11 hijackers. And, you know, at the time where they were trying to figure out what country to go after, they never went after Saudi Arabia. The U.S. will never go after Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia is the main funder of Wahhabist Islam. And that's what gets me, is like, when Trump said that was Pakistan, I'm like, yeah, Pakistan, but they get, you know, paid for by Saudi Arabia. But, you know, he won't say anything about Saudi Arabia because they just signed a huge arms deal with him. So, you know, there's definitely things I criticize that I have criticism of for the Trump administration. The fact that he's you know, completely treating his like administration like the Apprentice right now. Yeah, you're fired. You know, I can't do a Trump impression, but no, it's just ridiculous. But anyways, I'm gonna stop talking because I've gone for a long period of time, and but you know me, I just figure every now and then I just kind of put my thing on there, and if you guys listen for the entire duration, man, you guys need like a medal or something. So thank you very much for your time. Keep on rocking in the free world, and just hang in there as best as you can. Peace.